What's going on YouTube? I'm Nick the Tutor, and today we're going to talk about good SAT scores. As you know, many students are not sending in their SAT scores and going what's called test optional. Today we're going to talk about what a good SAT score is for 2022 and 2023, and we're going to go over exactly what scores you need to send them in. So let's get into it. All right, before I get into this video, I want to say one thing. Keep this all in perspective. There's a good SAT score for everybody. Everyone is not going to get a 1500. That's all good. We all have our respective talents and skills. So always just do your best, but do not worry about the outcome. Now, if you want more of this valuable information, make sure to hit that subscribe button, drop a like, drop a comment for the algorithm. Now let's get into it. All right, so first off, we want to talk about what is a good SAT score. That is all relative, depending on what schools you're applying to, what major you're applying to, that can really dictate what score is good. There's no good or bad scores when it comes to SAT scores, but there's a score that's going to work, and then there's scores that will not work. So basically what you want to look at is being at that 50th percentile rank. So if a school's 50th percentile SAT score is, say, a 1300, you want to make sure that you have at least a 1300 or above. If you're slightly below, that's probably okay, but if you're looking at like a 1250 or below, you definitely don't want to send that in. Now, how do we find out that information? All this information is readily available on the internet. You could check various sites. You could use things like Naviance. You could also just use Google. Now, I do want you to be careful with that, because what you need to look at is class of 2026 test results. That's the students that applied to college this past year. You want to make sure you're using those results, because the numbers have really gone up over the past few years. You do not want to use old data. Those test scores will be lower, and you could definitely get it wrong. So look for class of 2026 data. You can Google it and you can find it online, and then you'll know exactly what score you need for each individual school. Additionally, you want to make sure to look this up for every single school you apply to, because some schools you might want to apply to test optional, and others you want to send your test score in. In order to do this effectively, you need to know each school's respective 50th percentile scores. Now, if you're looking at more like a 75th percentile score, a top level score, you're really looking like you're in good shape for that particular school. That's really going to help your application. So you do want to try to study for and prepare for the SAT. That's a big question that I get here is, well, if it's optional, like, do I really need to do it? No, you don't. But if you do have a high score, you're going to be a step above everyone that does not have a high score. If you think that I'm wrong about that, if you think that test optional students are on equal playing field as test submitting students, comment down below. Let me know why you think that's the case. Show me some data. I'd love to see it. Now, if you are planning on preparing for the SAT, check out my online SAT course. I'll leave the link in the description below. It's an amazing 5-hour strategy course to help you bring up your score for those last few points. So check that out. All right, so let's talk about what test scores you need for certain types of colleges. If you're talking about local colleges and most state schools, maybe not the upper echelon state schools, but majority of them, you're going to be looking at what we would call a decent SAT score, something in the 1,000 to the 1,200 range. Obviously more toward the top end of that if you can. That will help you get into a lot of local schools, a lot of state schools. That's a really good score for those colleges. Now, of course, look it up, because each individual school could be different. Each major could be different. Of course, remember, students applying for engineering or accounting or nursing may want a higher test score than someone not applying for such subjects. So take a look at that as well. But once again, the decent SAT score is around the 1,200 range, and that gets you into a lot of local schools. Now, let's talk about good or very good SAT scores. So for a good SAT score that's typically deemed to be in the 1,300 range, that's going to get you into those upper echelon state schools. That's also going to get you into a lot of private schools. And it's also going to open you up to a lot of scholarships at, community colleges, state colleges, local colleges, and a lot of schools that were looking for that 1,200 range score are going to be dying for someone with that 1,300 range score. So if you can get to the 1,300 level, you're going to have a ton of options in terms of submitting your SAT score, a ton of scholarship options, and a broadened group of schools that you can apply to. So I highly recommend you try to get to that score level. So now, what is a great SAT score? What is a score that will get you into the top schools, the schools that everyone wants to go to? That's going to be the 14 plus 1,500 range. Now, if you're talking about top schools and you're talking about business programs, pre-med, nursing, accounting, all these rigorous programs at top schools, then you're gonna be looking at that 1,400 plus SAT score. That's gonna be a range that's gonna open up a ton of options for you. You can pretty much have every option except for the top 20 or 30 schools. If you can hit that 1,500 range or above, then you're basically open for every single school in the country and you can apply wherever you want. Now, look, if you don't hit those kind of scores and you still want to apply to the school, you feel like you have a great GPA, you have great extracurriculars, you do want to look at applying to those schools test optional. So once again, you can still apply to these schools if your score does not reach the level that you want it to. You still can apply, but you should apply test optional. Now, if you are applying test optional, what should you do? You should 100% make sure to focus on your essays and extracurricular activities. You want to make sure to have all of your ducks in a row, especially with all of your essays and supplemental essays, where you're really impressing them, because they're not going to have that test score to rely on anymore. So they're going to want to rely on something else. They want to look at your essays to show your academic promise, all of your skills, and your unique attributes. All right, so let's summarize what you should do to get into the college you want. You need to look up what the test scores you need are. Make sure that you focus on the 50th percentile or above. Then you want to study for, prepare for the SAT, try to get a score that's 50th percentile or above for that individual school or that individual program. Then determine if you can get there, send it in. If you can't, apply test optional. Focus on your essays to make sure you put yourself over that edge, and then you will get into the school that you want. At the end of the day, don't stress about the process. Keep it all in perspective. You will go to college, you will go somewhere that you want, and you will have an amazing experience, learn, grow, and move on to better things. I'll see you guys soon.